Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about BEPRO and why I think it's still a good bet going into all of this capitulation and FUD. And the reason why is because of a lot of updates that are coming to BEPRO, a lot of big news coming out, and a lot of big strides that the team is working towards to make sure that the system is functional, has enough developers and everything else. But we'll be talking all about that in this video. Go ahead and like the video if you like this type of content. Go ahead and subscribe if you want more crypto news and content. We only talk about altcoins, we talk about Bitcoin, the markets, and everything else that's happening. All right, everyone, let's get into it. So the big news for BEPRO is they're trying to move to more of an open source resource. And the big thing that you have with a lot of cryptocurrency projects right now, the big bottleneck for basically everyone is developers. Having enough manpower to develop products, to develop coding on the system. It's getting to be a pretty big dog-eat-dog world out there. Developers are being scalped by other teams. Unless you're working on a big team like Cardano, Polkadot, Ethereum, or something like that, you're typically going to be sought after to work for other projects. Even those big teams do get some people leaving to go over to smaller projects. So it is realistic to see that the big bottleneck for a lot of these products are going to be developers and that's what's going to dictate what most of the timelines are based off of. So basically what this does is it allows them to tap into the immense amount of manpower out there in terms of open source developers that are able to contribute onto their blockchain and be able to code and help out. So basically it would work that developers would use the Java-based code base and create on the code. And now this is something that's not uncommon for blockchain, especially. This has happened with Ethereum, Uniswap, and a bunch of other protocols. So really having something open source to me is a little bit more bullish. I've always been of the mindset that open source anything is always going to provide the best end result. I typically find that when things are closed source, usually profits tend to slip in, but when you have something open source, there's some sort of magic that happens with the community that's able to create and build on the code base. There's some sort of magic that happens there that really creates a fantastic product. For me, I see a lot of open source products as being able to foster a lot of innovation and be able to take a lot of community input. So for me, in terms of open source news, this is hugely bullish for BEPRO, where BEPRO can go and who's going to build onto BEPRO. Again, BEPRO is not this short-term thing for me. I'm not holding BEPRO to expect it to go to $3.67 in the near term. But realistically, could it hit an evaluation that high later on down the road? Anything is possible. That is roughly, I think I did the math, roughly around $16 billion. The gambling market alone is growing by tens of billions every year. And that's seeing more and more with COVID and everything else. We see casinos closed and now starting to open up. There's a huge demand in terms of gambling and online gambling and everything else, and especially moving into this online world that we're moving into. But when you tap into something like that with cryptocurrency and cryptocurrency services and that focus, it could be hugely bullish on the system. So is it realistic that in the near term, we enter billions and billions of dollars of evaluation? Probably not in the near term if we're talking weeks to months, but in terms of a year, or the end of the bull market. A couple of comments here from the CEO that we've mentioned before on the channel. So he mentions the exact same thing that I was just talking about. The real limitation factor of blockchain industry isn't capital, it isn't marketing, and it isn't even hype, right? The social aspect, the Twitter, everyone getting hype about a project. You see them all the time, even with you BEPRO bros. You're going to be down there right now. BEPRO, rocket ships, and everything else. But the big limiting factor to cryptocurrency is developers. And he cites some of the best open source blockchains. So Ethereum, Polkadot, we see that with the Substrate strain. We see what's happening in the Polkadot ecosystem right now. It's hugely bullish. You have Uniswap and a bunch of others. So open source has been proven in the space before. I'm hugely bullish on open source. I like open source as a concept and an idea. I'm more of a free trade kind of person anyway. So when you talk about open source, that's kind of music to my ears. Now, they are looking in mid-2021 to increase the interface with a DAO and use the BEPRO tokens. So there are other projects and promises coming down the pipelines. In terms of where BEPRO is now, and obviously we've had a bit of a downturn. So I want to reiterate, because every time we discuss BEPRO and it pumps, it dumps. And you might be wondering, why is that? What's happening here? Every time the trend changes, every time we get a little bit bullish about BEPRO, it ends up dumping. And that's a valid concern, and that should be something that you do look into when you're looking at a lot of projects. But I would say with BEPRO, every time the trend has changed and it's swung to the upside, every single time we saw Bitcoin capitulate, and because this cap is such a low cap, it's going to capitulate with it. Now, I think one of the biggest bullish indicators for BEPRO is the fact that we've held this line of resistance. Now, we are down at the very bottom of this channel is what it looks like. We've held back before here, and now we're retesting this level. So this could be a bullish indicator in terms of we've bottomed out in terms of BEPRO. I do think at this point, BEPRO is undervalued. I think it's been undervalued for a while. Even when it was up at 4 or 5 cents, it's still dramatically undervalued for what the platform could do and where the platform is going to go in the long term. If you factor in things like prediction betting, sports betting, gambling, everything else that BEPRO has the capability to onboard onto services, that is hugely bullish and a hugely bullish ecosystem to be involved in for the next 5 to 10 years. So I'm super excited where BEPRO is going to go in the long term, and I'm not really fazed by this capitulation. So I have still been accumulating BEPRO. It's still one of my active accumulations. It hasn't gotten to a level that it's already pumped. And we've discussed before why you should not buy products that have already pumped dramatically, why you want to focus on the products that haven't really moved or dumped a little bit or to an exaggerated point. Now, I wouldn't say that BEPRO is exaggerated, but it hasn't really done any moves since its last big pump. So the reality is it could still pump from here, and I am expecting well over its all-time high at 5 cents, well over that, probably way more by the end of the bull market. And if you saw my video that I put out earlier today, way more if the bull market is extended because of this Bitcoin capitulation. So just keep that in mind. But I do think where BEPRO is going to go is hugely bullish. Now, one big thing, and you'll notice here that I'm looking at the KuCoin, BEPRO, and Tether chart. One big thing here is that we really just trade on KuCoin and Uniswap. So that's been a big issue for BEPRO. There's a lot of bots on KuCoin that probably pressed the token down a little bit, but there is a bullish sentiment changing. We've heard of some partnerships with some prominent YouTubers, and we could also be seeing something else coming down the pipe. Now, I'm not exactly sure what's happening. This is probably more speculation than anything, but I've heard maybe, possibly, we could be getting some sort of BSC integration with BEPRO, which would mean that we get another decentralized exchange being Pancake Swap, which is extremely bullish if we do find ourselves on either another DEX or a Binance listing. I think a Binance listing would basically be end games for BEPRO at that point. But a BSC listing, I will more than settle for a Pancake Swap BEPRO. And at that point, if you can't get into the staking pool on KuCoin, if we do have BSC integration, then at that point, then we can provide our BEPRO as liquidity with BNB token and then earn cake on top of that. So hugely bullish on where it could go. If we do get a listing on another DEX, that's going to be great. It's still tradable on Uniswap and KuCoin for now. So we'll see what happens with the news. I'm really excited where BEPRO is going to go. I think BEPRO is going to really pump in the long term. And I do think one day we will see our 367 BEPRO. All right, everyone, go ahead and like the video, subscribe to the channel for more crypto news and content, and of course, happy hodling.